Welcome to the Scale Ups podcast, where each week you get to hear Sean Steele, professional CEO, growth mentor, and advisory board chair, unpack the strategies that successful founders have used to achieve scale in their businesses. Stay tuned as he interviews the entrepreneurs who've made it, learns from industry experts, and follows a group of founders still striving to scale.
G'day everyone, and welcome to the Scale Ups podcast, where we help first-time founders learn the secrets of scaling so they can fulfill the potential of their businesses, maximize the value they can create in the world, and make bigger decisions with greater confidence. I'm your host, Sean Steele, and I'm joined today by Glenn Keys of Aspen Medical, who many of our audience will have heard of before. How are you today, Glenn?
Really well. Thanks very much, Sean.
Wonderful. Well, we're very pleased to have you here, and I can't wait to dig in today, and I'm sure the listeners will understand why in a moment. For those who don't know your background, Glenn, you grew up in training and testing, flying and engineering and logistics support in the ADF, followed by 5 years, if I've got that right, at Raytheon, which is a big defense capability partner, as the GM of business development and strategy before founding Aspen Medical in 2003, which was almost 18 years ago now. Does it feel like a long time ago? Or does it feel like yesterday?
It feels both. Sometimes it feels like a million years ago, and other days it feels like yesterday morning.
Yeah, no doubt. And so you are currently executive chairman. You've got Bruce Armstrong in there running the business as the group CEO. And for those who don't know Aspen Medical, just to give some people, or give our community some insight into what it is that you do, that you now have a team of over 3,000 working across Australasia, the Pacific Rim, Middle East, Africa, the US, the UK. And that's outsourced healthcare solutions, which means it could be anything as simple as a single paramedic, all the way up to spinning up full solutions like ambulances and medical facilities and medicines themselves and the practitioners and the surgical teams and the aircraft, and the list goes on. To put it in perspective, folks, Aspen Medical is the only commercial organization globally to be certified by the World Health Organization as an emergency medical team capable of deploying specialist surgical and outbreak response teams, which I think is just staggering. When you started the company, Glenn, did you have that in your mind as something even being possible?
No idea at all. We knew that we wanted to create a business that would do complete healthcare solutions. And we knew we wanted to create something where people would be better off because of what we did. And of course, we wanted to operate globally, but we had no idea where this journey would take us and the jobs we would do and the good that we would deliver to people around the world in some of the most challenging environments you can imagine.
And I can, when you think about orienting a team or an organization around a for-purpose organization like yours that has real impact on people, that becomes even more difficult, whilst it may be assumed by some of the professions that they're in. That becomes even more difficult when you're doing this across multiple continents, multiple disciplinary teams, and having to scale up so quickly. Maybe, Glenn, you could give us, just by way of an introduction, give us a sort of an example of a typical client, someone who might engage you, whether it's a government or an NGO or otherwise. What's the client? What's the problem? And how do you go about solving that?
So those problems typically for the clients that you're referring to typically fall into two categories. There are those who've got the sort of long-term planning model where they put out a tender, they know they need healthcare, perhaps to a workforce in rural Queensland, or they're a government that wants someone to come in and clear a surgical waiting list. So they're all pretty standard. That's a tender. You'll write a response, might be open or it might be restricted, and then you'll develop a solution and a pricing model, negotiate. So that's one side. But the other side is where you get a phone call from a customer, could be a government, could be an international NGO like the UN or the WHO, or it could be a corporate who says, we have a really big problem and we actually have no idea how to fix it. And you say, okay, well, and typically they will say, can you fix it? And you have to go, well, I don't know yet. What we're going to do is sit down with you and we're going to scope the problem. We're going to try to understand it. Are there limitations on what you need to do? Are there limitations on the sort of people we can deploy? Maybe there are some cultural issues of what we can deploy. Maybe there's some gender issues. Maybe we can only be deploying women if it's a maternity wing and we're deploying it into a particular culture. Maybe there are some budgetary constraints. Maybe there are time constraints. And so we'll overlay all of those needs, demands, and bring them together and then develop a solution. And where we can't, we've got to go straight back to the customer and go, this can't be delivered within the constraints that you want for the following reasons. Maybe it can't be done within the budget. Maybe it can't be done within the headcount, within the time frame. But you try to be clear with people about those things and explain it to them. And that's been really, really helpful, because we don't just sit there and say, we can do everything you want. Yeah. We have to be able to say, I can do what you want, or I can't do it. And if I can't do it, either here's why it can't be done, or maybe I can recommend someone who can help.
Or maybe I can do a part of it, and maybe there's somebody else who can
maybe
do
there's
part.
A different way to do it than what you're thinking about.
What do you, I'm just imagining some of those conversations, Glenn. You know, some of course that are methodical and they're thought out because they're long-term planning oriented, and so they've thought about budget and so on. But others that are complete crisis mode, like something's really, you know, this is an incredible emergency, it's crisis oriented. I'm assuming how do conversations about budget play out in a circumstance like that, where they're just going, this needs to be solved like yesterday?
Yeah, what we try to do is at least give them then a ROM costing. So we'll work with them and develop a solution. Then we'll develop a ROM, you know, reasonable order of magnitude, and we'll give them an idea of where it lives within that and see whether they can live with that. And then we try to define it down. So we say, okay, these things, these elements of it, we know really well. So that's going to cost you this much. This bit's going to cost you this much. And then there might be some that's up to them. You know, can you guys help with maybe moving equipment or people into a location, or do you want us to go buy that? Can you help with facilities, or do you want us to bring those in? So we'll go through and then just refine down each one of those to just give them more and more clarity. And you know, when I was learning test flying, as you can imagine, one of the things that's always important is no surprises. And that's how we try to be with our customers as well. We don't want them to be surprised by an unexpected cost or an unexpected delay or an unexpected time frame. You want to co-create these solutions with them so that they are with you every part of the journey and every step of the way, so they understand what is being created to support their need.
There's some real learnings in that, just in the co-creation model for many B2B businesses, which I often still see today go off, you know, think they've understood a problem, go off and develop a solution and then come back with the thing fully cooked, as opposed to actually co-creating along the way, where there's really sometimes opportunity to increase the buy-in, but often the solution might look a little bit different, and it may have saved people a lot of time because those expectations are being aligned all the way along.
Yeah, and I'll just pick up a point you said there. You said, oh, you know, you might be able to grow even more business. There's actually something to be said for saying, looking at it, co-creating it and going, you know, this is not what you want. This is more than, you don't need this bigger solution. It could be smaller than that. It could be this, because you've overcooked it here, or you've misunderstood the requirements. And you want to say it in a way that's sensitive to them, because they're obviously under a lot of pressure. And we've found it's far better to do that, because they will come back to you again and again and again, because you develop that position of trust with that customer, and they'll use you for other work, or they'll refer you to other people and say, oh, you know, Aspen came to us and they did all of these things, and we trust Aspen Medical, so maybe you should have a chat to them. But we try to treat every customer as we would want to be treated. We would want someone to be honest with us. We'd want them to be straight up, tell us if what we've proposed is wrong, and try to give us the most cost-effective and value-driven solution. Absolutely.
If you were to take us back to the genesis of the business, and I guess how you were thinking about it in the first place, tell us about the inception of this business. What were you thinking? What problem were you trying to solve then, considering how it's evolved since then?
Look, they all come with context, and you look at what drove you into those decisions. At that time, I'd left the military. I'd actually, in my potted history you gave, you missed a small piece, which was I my wife and I have a son with Down syndrome. So I left the military because we needed stability to look after him and support him. And there was a really critical piece of work to do that was being started up at that time, which was, at that time, there was a lot of work being done by outsourcing companies that were very low level, cleaning, cooking, driving vehicles, that sort of stuff. But governments were starting to realise that there was now another layer of costs that they could outsource that was much higher. So engineering, design, test flying, all of that sort of stuff. And so this startup was to target that bit of the market. And so I was recruited to start that company and build it. And so that was very exciting. And that was the company that got sold to Raytheon that you mentioned. So we built that up to about 80 staff in 3 cities across Australia, doing quite a lot of work. It was very exciting. And then we went to Raytheon. And so I'd been a part of understanding that formative stage of government outsourcing higher end activities, where they'd say, can you actually do not just the engineering design, but then go and install it in the aircraft? So we were doing black box recorders and night vision instrumentation, really high tech, interesting work. Anyway, working at Raytheon, and I was now able to see a global company and how a global company interacted and how it leveraged off what it would do in one country into another. And that was very exciting too. And I was in England with a very, very good friend of mine having dinner, and he caught up and he said, look, I just want to tell you about what Tony Blair is going to do. Tony Blair is going to completely revolutionise how healthcare is delivered. And, I have to say, in all of the history that you read over Tony Blair, I don't think he's been acknowledged for really what was quite a seminal program in healthcare in the UK. And at that time, the NHS was the 3rd largest employer in the world. So only the Chinese Army and the Indian Railways had more staff than the NHS.
Wow.
And so, as you can imagine, a lot of people in the UK health system had grown up in the NHS, and their models of engagement and development and thinking came out of the NHS. Even when they went to work at private companies, they took a lot of that NHS thinking with them. And some of it is golden and is copied around the world. But it perhaps needed a bit of a refresh, and there were quite significant waiting lists, and England was one of the very first countries in the world to try to deal with long waiting lists and how to get people more efficiently through the system. So this friend of mine, wonderful guy in the health system, very impressive, said, that there's a real opportunity here to bring different thinking into England, into the NHS to address this. And I think it's a business opportunity. So I went back to Australia. I was still working at Raytheon. Chatted to us, a friend of mine who was a doctor, ran his own businesses, quite very successful, and said to him, here's a real opportunity that you should look at. And he said, well, government tendering, project management, it's not what I do. Mine's had quite a large number of retail businesses around Australia, but they were retail, not tendered out of government. And he said, why don't we do it together? So that's where we started. And so the very first work we bid on was in England with the NHS, initially doing a consultancy on how to take a 2-year waiting list down to 6 months and then down to 6 weeks. And we then won the contract to implement that and to actually go and do it. And that was exciting. And we cleared thousands of hip and knee replacements, minor orthopaedic procedures, and thousands of outpatient appointments across all these sites in the north of England. And an amazing opportunity and a great way to start the company.
And was that, sort of 2 guys with a great idea and a response to tender, and then it was like, okay, you've got it, and you're going, wow, we actually have to get a team now, and then had to sort of scurry and talent pool and find all these people? How did you get the sort of people to support your first implementation?
Yeah, if only it was as easy as what you just said. It was actually harder because we had 2 projects in different countries, neither of them are Australia, and we had to do that. So we had won this contract in the UK, so that was 7 teams across 7 sites in the north of England to clear 5,000 hip and knee replacements, 7,000 minor orthopaedic procedures, and 5,000 outpatient appointments. At the same time, we'd won a contract working for the Australian government in the Solomon Islands. And we had to procure all the material to set up a hospital that would do primary care, pathology, radiology, dental, pharmacy, have a ward, have an emergency department, have surgery, have environmental health, ambulance, aeromedical evacuation. And we had to buy all that equipment, ship it into the Solomon Islands and set it up at the same time as we were starting 7 sites in England. And there was me sitting at my dining table in Canberra. And we didn't have any staff.
Wow. And obviously you pulled it together.
We did. It was an incredibly stressful time. We tapped all of our resources. You know, we really bet on ourselves. You know, I remember one day having to come home and we had payroll due, and we were not due to get paid by our prime contractor for another 10 days. But we were due to pay salaries the next day. And I came home to my wife and I said, we're short $100,000 in salaries. So we pulled out all the bank accounts, laid them all out on the table and emptied all the accounts. And then that gave us the $100,000 and that allowed us to pay salaries and get through to the next week where we had the next invoice paid and that could be paid back. Wow. But it was... You know, I still remember my wife sort of saying, you know, are we there? Do you have everything? Because I still have the kids' super saver accounts from school if we need to tap into. And I went, hang on to those. We may need to eat. So, you know, but we bet on ourselves several times to make that happen and pull it together. But what really counted, what really made it work were just amazing people. So the people that we recruited and came to the company, many of which still work for us today, were just an incredible people, incredibly dedicated, really flexible, very agile in their thinking, and they took the problem and they made it a solution. And that's where our real success was getting great people, giving them a clear target and letting them get on and get it done.
And I want to come back to that thought because, you know, we talked offline about some of those, I guess, some of the ingredients that have allowed you to scale and some of the philosophies, I suppose, and, you know, that level of agility and hiring the right people and sort of inculcating that kind of culture where you're able to do that and the business model that allows you to do that's been really pivotal. But just to get, you know, one of the things that's interesting about that story is it was probably one of the first step changes. And of course, the business has gone through other step changes since then. And if my stats are correct, you know, you guys have won $1.3 billion worth of contracts in the last 18 months through to this month. Is that right?
Yeah, 2-year period. Yeah. But that's been a lot of work we've won in a lot of period of time. And in actual fact, you know, we're now sitting at about 7,500 staff worldwide.
7,500. Wow. And that's off the back of these contracts primarily.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And so when we talked about, let's come back then to the agility and the talent pooling, because maybe we can start with that. I mean, that's a significant amount of pressure on a business. And for those people who don't think services businesses can scale, well, I guess you're listening to a founder who could probably say that maybe there's different ways to do that. But scaling an organization in services is often really challenging, of course, because it is people. It's fundamentally it's people and its capability and its quality and it's your ability to continue to uphold the reputation that you've built so far that you said is so important to this company, but then to do it at scale and really rapid scale is incredibly challenging. So tell me what this experience has been like for you in that sort of the ability to scale that quickly.
Well, and I think on top of the ability to scale, the other challenge we've got is we're working in a COVID environment. We don't get to travel around the world. We've been moving some people, but it's hard, like everybody knows. And so you've got to really rely on your people on the ground. And that could be in New Guinea, it could be in Fiji, it could be in the Middle East or America, but it also can be in West Australia and Queensland because you just can't get there to see them. And so you have to trust them. You've got to have the right people in the job. You need to give them a clear indication, and then you need to listen to them. So, we were talking only today about an opportunity, and I thought it seemed like an absolute Monty for us. And I had one of my very senior guys say, we just don't think we should be doing this right now. It's not a great job. It's not a huge amount of money. We need to keep our eye on the prize, and this is what we should do. And I'm always sad when I say that, but he was absolutely right. It was the right thing to do to not chase that. And so scaling in a COVID world is just like, taking something to the 10th factor. It is hard, but it's going to be done with good people. But you also have to listen to them, and you have to know what you should chase and what you shouldn't chase.
And so the ability to still say no, right? That I don't think that changes at any size of company. And quite often, in a conversation that I had with a founder yesterday who said, in the biggest thing that they've done to get to double the size of their company in the last 3 years is just start saying no to more stuff and really niche down on their customer and get really clear about the value they need to create and who it is they're trying to serve, and just be willing to say no to everything else, because the shareholder expectations and everybody wants growth and everybody's got an opinion and a view and this sort of outside pressure. And as you building up your fixed cost base, you're trying to make sure everybody's fully utilized, and it can be a really vicious cycle. And so saying no sometimes gets harder as the company gets bigger, doesn't it?
Oh no, it does. It does. And as you get bigger, people see what you do and they go, well, if you can do that there, can you do this here? And sometimes the answer is, I could have done that if I hadn't done this one first. So, but you're right though, it is hard to say no. And particularly when you're on a roll, you want to be able to keep growing and keep doing that business. But it's got to be good growth. Can't just be any growth.
So how do you approach, coming back to the agility that we talked about before, how do you approach, I can imagine the sort of talent pooling exercise is a whole orchestration in and of itself so that you can scale up for these rapid response type opportunities. How do you think about that sort of talent pooling and the culture of agility?
So it's fundamental to us. And, I've gone on about people quite a lot already. So people are really fundamental to who we are, but it's not just the people in your company. And I think this is what a lot of people forget, is that we've had a lot of people cycle through our company. They've come and enjoyed, they've worked in Indigenous communities or remote communities, or gone and done surgery waiting list programs, or worked in Africa on Ebola. And then they go back to their normal job or go on to another job or get promoted. But we've maintained close contact with them and created that alumni, so that so many of the opportunities that come to us come from people who have worked for us and reach out and say, oh, just thought you might be interested in this, or I'm working here and we need a hand. Can you help us? Or, I bumped into people and I'm sure I've recognized them from somewhere, and they go, oh, this is my third time working for Aspen Medical. And, I think a lot of people think that the only people you should pay attention to are the staff that are in your company that day. But the people who've been in your company, they are your advocates. They are out there. They know you. And people will actually say, oh, Sean, you've worked for Aspen Medical in the past. What did you think of them? And so that they are your advocates. They are your alumni, and they should be treasured and supported too.
Yeah, 100%. And you mentioned to me in the way that you actually set up the projects, part of the way that you establish the projects and the resourcing around projects is also something that sort of helps with that agility and the ability to take on additional work sometimes quite rapidly. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So when we were starting the company, we knew that we would need more people because we wanted to grow. Right. And we knew that the sort of work we get is typical short notice work. So what we did was say, how do we get ready for that? So a lot of our customers will pay us to have a project manager run the project. And so he or she is usually in country working on the project and running it. What we then did was we funded a deputy project manager who would sit under them, and that was our cost. But they were there to provide backup, someone for the project manager to talk to, someone who could step up if the project manager was on leave. But if we won a new project, we could take that the project manager, move them to the new project, and the deputy project manager would step up. And immediately you'd have your most skilled person running your new project, and their, that person who'd been working in their shadow, their mentee behind them, who'd been there as their protege, now taking over that project. And that allowed us, and still allows us, the opportunity to scale.
Well, and what a wonderful career building and professional development opportunity for them, knowing that actually there's going to be some opportunities sometimes that you may not feel quite ready for, but you're going to be thrust into the limelight and given the opportunity to lead, but you've had that mentoring opportunity and you've been able to see how it's done. That's a wonderful way of building capability in the business.
Yeah, and has just been invaluable for us.
And in this kind of organization and something that moves that rapidly and has that many moving parts and tentacles, systems, of course, play such an important role. How did the systems evolve over time and how have they enabled the scale?
Look, they have obviously evolved, and they started with none, quite honestly, when you start. And our very first systems were those written on the ground for that first project. And so we wrote those there. We wrote the ones we needed in England. And then we started to backfill, bringing in people into the executive and filling them up within the organisation. One thing we'd always seen was important was accreditation. So we got ISO 9000 quite early, which was great because it forced us to make sure that we had all of our policies and procedures. And I'd been involved with that in other companies, and a lot of people think that, policies and procedures and quality accreditation force you to do business a certain way. And I said, no. It's around documenting the way you do business. So let's don't go and try and change the process. Just document what you do well. Now, the joy of documenting a process is that when you do that, you go, wow, that looks quite inefficient. And so you use it as an opportunity to improve and refine. Mm-hmm. And as you grow, you need to change those and amend them. But that quality accreditation has been critical throughout our history. And that's helped us grow systems. And then we've moved on, we've rolled out our ERP program that isn't just here for Australia, but reaches out to every single entity we have around the world. So, we continue to grow and develop our systems. And then, as scenarios change, you bring in new ones. All of our cybersecurity has now come in. We're moving towards all of that accreditation. We're going through all of the necessary demands of our customers. So, we have a number of oil and gas customers have very, very high standards, privacy standards that are above those of Australia. So we adopt those standards worldwide. If we have to pick it up for one customer in England, well, we adopt it the whole of the world. Then we know that we're at the highest standard no matter where we need to be.
That's fabulous. Actually, I remember Flight Centre has a sort of, one way our way, which is also one way the best way. If we find out a best way of doing something, we're all going to do it that way. And then the goal is to iterate that, make it better, but then again, standardize it. So I love that sort of taking best practice and taking the high watermark and then applying it everywhere. In a business like this, given the nature of that need to scale up and large contracts, large customers who've got some long-term things and some very large pieces of work, that means you've probably in the past also had challenging periods where you've also had to scale down, whether you come off the ends of these large contracts. Can you take me through any of those sorts of challenges?
Yeah, so about 8 years ago, we won a very large contract, double the size of the company. And it was for 4 years, and it was hard to scale up at that requirement. It was a customer with very high standards, justifiably so. And so we met that requirement, and it was hard work, but it was good work, and we did really well. I was very, very happy with it, and we knew the end date because it was a period of a contract, and when it came to the end, we knew it was coming, and we scaled down. What was challenging out of that, and what I really learnt, was that there were a number of things that were quite baked in by then. So while we thought we were scaling down to where we were previously at the 50% mark, in actual fact, there were things that we thought we were getting rid of, but were just seemed to be baked on. And that became quite challenging then to do those reviews and go, well, why are we doing that? Is that the most efficient way to do it? Do we still need that capability? If we do, can we do something different to make sure we make back that cost? And so, there was a bit of the 80-20 rule. The first 80 was easy to get rid of. The last 20, that was 80% of the effort.
Yeah. And that's, in a people organization, that's also incredibly difficult to do because you've probably recruited some wonderful people where you're thinking, I know we need to scale down, but that's talent we don't want to lose. Like that's a capability that we might need in the future. How did you wrestle with that as a board?
So it did come down to a board decision because we got to a position where we had to do one of two things. We either had to dramatically reduce the size of the company to get those costs under control, or make a decision that we were going to invest in the future. That, as you just said, Sean, we didn't want to lose those key staff who were critical to being able to ramp up and deliver on projects. We don't want to see them go out the door, but we still need to get back to being a profitable business. So how do we do that? And so path one, dramatically reduce overhead and offshore work, get rid of staff. Option two, actually invest in the future, bet on ourselves. And that includes more business development, looking hard at all your procedures, working out where all your costs are and seeing, am I billing enough? Am I spending too much? What do I do there? And how do I win new business that's going to support this or grow the current business to do that? So came down to that as a board decision, and the board decided on option two. So that was a big deal for the board, but it gave some real clarity around where we wanted to go. And so that's the way we focused. And it meant that when we had some opportunities start to come up at the beginning of last year around support for a whole range of those activities at the beginning of COVID, we were ready to go because we'd kept the staff we needed. We had the right people on board, and we'd also worked to refine down our procedures to get them to be quite cost efficient at the same time as rolling out system-wide ERPs, etc.
I love the fact that actually, if you think about the number of bets that you've had to take on the business, on the way up, this was a really challenging bet that, with much higher stakes, more at risk, more people involved in the company, more opportunities that are going to be won or lost as a result. And you double down, but as a result, you also got access to opportunities that you wouldn't have been able to get otherwise to help people and to provide a great service to people who needed it.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And you look back on it now and you think, gee whiz, that was a big call. But at the time, looking at it logically, balancing all of the pros and cons, because there were pros and cons for each model, that was where we thought we needed to go.
Glenn, can I ask you, what makes you come alive in business, and how do you feel that that's sort of shown up in the way the organisation how it's evolved to where it is today?
Well, I love a challenge. I love a complex problem. I love when a customer says, I got a big problem and I don't know what to do. And then I love working with the team. I don't have the mortgage on knowledge. I don't know the answer. But what I think I'm good at is working with our team to develop that answer, and really asking those sort of, dummy chairman questions of going, well, why do we need that? And why are we doing that? And could we do this like this? But the working with that team as they develop solutions is just, I love that. And then getting those packaged, taking them back to a customer, having them sign off and then delivering, that is just amazing. And if I look around, I think about the work we did in Iraq during the war in West Mosul, where we were asked to go in and run trauma and maternity hospitals. At the end of 15 months, we had treated 48,000 civilian casualties, and we'd delivered 3,000 babies. And we'd stood up a number of hospitals with Iraqi nationals. So we hadn't just rode in on a white horse with a bunch of foreigners and set up the hospital and said, aren't we good? And then left feeling good for ourselves. We recruited Iraqis who were just fantastic clinicians, just brilliant, co-designed and created all of the operating procedures and methodologies, had everything in Arabic and English, had them invested and owning how it ran, and then slowly recruited till we were 100% Iraqis, and then handed the hospitals back to the Iraqi Ministry of Health to run.
Wow.
And we left that asset there. You know, that legacy that we've created, I love that. When we were in Timor, and Ramos Horta, who had done so much as a freedom fighter for the nation, was shot during an attempted assassination, brought into our operating hospital. Our team operated on him for 6 hours, removed 3 high-powered bullets, did a liver resection. We put 12 units of Australian soldiers' blood through him, and it was our aircraft that flew him back to Darwin, and our ambulance that took him around to Royal Darwin Hospital. And when he came back to Timor, he presented the Timor Solidarity Medal to all of our staff who'd been at the hospital. The only civilians to ever be awarded the medal. It's reserved for the military or police, other uniformed staff. And you know, you look and you think, what would have happened to that country if he had died?
Yeah.
It probably would have descended into infighting. Whereas now you look at where Timor is as a burgeoning new country in the world, democratically elected government. You know, when we left after being up there for a decade running the healthcare services for the coalition forces up there, when I arrived, there were 5,000 people living in plastic tents in the middle of the city, supported by the UN. By the time I left, there was a Gloria Jean's cafe underneath the 3D motion picture theatre in the centre of town. And you just look around and think we've had a small part, but a part to play in a whole nation getting back on its feet and having a real solid future in the world. Those are the things that get me passionate. That's what I love doing.
Wow, what an incredible legacy to leave, and to be able to use business as a vehicle for good to provide those services, and you know, for your team to know to be able to sleep at night and tell those stories to their children about what they got to contribute to, and you know, what are we here for if it's not for service to others? What a wonderful way to be able to do that, you know, as part of your profession and as part of the company that you work for.
Yeah, and look, we, we're a private company, we're doing this work, but we see ourselves as a partner. You know, public health has got a critical role that we can never replace. And so working closely with government, working closely with public health services, other health providers, the community, I think that's when we see the best out of all of us, is when we're collaborative. There is no one answer to everything. And it's understanding where your role is and what you're best at that is critical. And I think this is one of the reasons that we have such a strong group of people who work in the company, is that they see also that Aspen has a very strong social purpose at our core. And, our staff turnover rates are half that of the healthcare industry. And when we talk to people about why they stay, it's because they see that the company has a strong social purpose, that we can benefit shareholders and benefit the community. We can make a profit, but we can make a difference.
Yeah.
And I think that's very powerful.
Yeah. And I always think, fundamentally, in the absence of profit, what have you got to invest in your ability to scale your impact? And if you're in a business that creates impact, surely you want to be able to create as much positive impact as possible. You need profitability to do that. It's not an ugly or a dirty thing. It's fundamentally part and parcel of your capacity to invest in yourself.
And if you have a look, what I think the language is changing now, and it's right to change, but not-for-profits aren't really not-for-profit. They have to make a profit, right? Because they need to operate. Yeah. They just don't distribute it to shareholders. They decide to either save it for another day, to reinvest in a new capability, to buy an asset, but they're still making a profit.
Yep,
they just decide to redeploy it towards another methodology.
Yep. It's not a sustainable model if there's no profitability.
That's right.
Glenn, can you take me out into the future? What does Aspen look like 3 years from now, do you think?
It's a great question. We will still be a healthcare company. We're not going to diversify into construction or get into areas that don't relate. I think we will continue to grow our service offering to our current customers. I think technology is already a big part of what we do, but it's really going to grow. And I think the last 18 months of COVID has supercharged the engagement of technology in just about every business. And I see, us being a tech-enabled business, no matter what we do as a healthcare solution provider. I see us being in more geographical regions than we are now. And I see us delivering pretty much anything that you need from a health point of view for our customer base. That's what we provide. We already provide corporate and occupational health and mental health. I think there's going to be an explosion to that area, and we'll continue to grow in that area, as well as all of the normal health services that are wrapped up. But I would like to see us continue to grow and continue to deliver a legacy wherever we're needed.
Well, that sounds like an exciting future for you and your team, Glenn. I have one last question for you, and that is a segment that I call Above All Else. And I ask this of every founder who's scaled an organization, and that is, I want you to now go out into your yearning years. So let's imagine a time where actually, even as the executive chair, you're like, okay, this is I'm ready to maybe put the tools down for a while. You've still got heaps of knowledge in your head, and you get a call from the global CEO of the world's largest community of first-time founders, tens of millions in their community of, people still trying to scale their first businesses, looking curious and hungry for ideas and lessons and learnings. And she gives you a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to crystallize some of your greatest wisdom for this group. And she says, I'd like you to finish this sentence, Glenn. Above all else, the 3 things you must get right as a founder if you want to scale are, what would be your 3 things?
You have to be genuine. You have to be true to yourself, true to all of your staff, and true to whatever mission you must have. You must have a value set and you must live by them. So you must do exactly what is required to do it. And the final thing is, you must be prepared to bet on yourself. Because if you won't bet on yourself, you can't ask anyone to do that.
Wow. Absolutely beautifully said, Glenn, and thank you for sharing that. I know that is incredibly instructive for founders anywhere they might be listening to this or watching this today. I would really like to acknowledge you for the way that you built this company. I think, you mentioned to me some words like, overnight success that might have taken, 18 years. Everybody gets to see the big, shiny balls at the end in terms of the impact that you might be having, but they don't see the slog and the bets that you had to take and the emptying of the bank accounts around the kitchen table to make payroll and all of the times where you had to sit around at a board level and think, are we really willing to back this thing because we've got options, right? We can make different decisions here, but we're going to go all in because we believe in this business and we believe in these people and the impact we can have. I think the heart-centered approach that you've taken to this business and the faith that you've put in yourself and your people is really a wonderful thing to watch. So thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today. How can people follow along with the company or with yourself? How do they get in contact or follow what you're doing?
So, well, we're on a lot of social media. We're on the web. We have aspenmedical.com. We have Facebook. We have Twitter. We're on LinkedIn. And we'd love to have them join in our story, see what we're doing, how we contribute, whether it's contributing to a contract or whether it's contributing to the range of philanthropic organisations that we support, either corporately or our staff support, who we then back. We'd love to have them follow our story on any of those platforms.
Wonderful. Thank you, Glenn. We'll make sure that all of those are available in the show notes for people. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed the show today. Huge thanks to Glenn Keys from Aspen. Before you go, of course, if you got value from what Glenn's had to say today, and I think that you'd be pretty hard pressed not to. We'd love it if you'd provide a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps people get access to this podcast, gets it into the hands of more people like yourself. And of course, it gives our team a huge kick, the ones who work so hard on putting this together for you. If you'd like to know when new episodes are going to drop, or you'd like access to free tools or resources that our guests provide, just jump on the website, scaleupspodcast.com. You can leave your email there, or you can send us an audio message via SpeakPipe on the right-hand side. Feel free to ask us a question, or give us a comment that you'd like to get through to myself or one of our guests to handle in the future on scaling in your own company. If you love the socials, you can find us on @ScaleUpsPodcast on any of your favorite socials. But remember, before you go today, the only thing that can guarantee that you won't be able to scale is to give up. And it's going to get hard. And it's not going to be easy. And you're going to be faced with stuff like Glenn's been faced with over and over and over again. Scaling up and scaling down. Every one of those growth lines that you see on a chart is full of jagged little ups and downs and ups and downs. And you can easily get off when the going gets tough. But that is the thing that's going to guarantee you won't scale. So you have to stay unshakable in your faith that you're going to get there, but incredibly flexible and adaptive in your approach. You've been listening to the Scale Ups podcast. I'm Sean Steele. Look forward to speaking with you again next week. And thanks so much, Glenn. G'day everyone, just a couple of quick things before you go. If you have questions that you'd love myself or an upcoming guest to tackle about challenges that you're facing in scaling your business, please just jump straight on the website, scaleupspodcast.com. You can record your message straight from your mobile by hitting the button on the right-hand side of the page, or you can just email them the old-fashioned way, questions@scaleupspodcast.com. And just a quick reminder, nothing we spoke about today constitutes financial or business advice. If you are considering making big decisions in your business, seek out a professional who can look at your situation in detail and make sure you're getting sound, personalised advice. Thanks for listening. Look forward to being back in your podcast feed next week.